Okay, so now we're going to move on to sewing. So for the sewing, we're going to use a curved needle. This works really well for the chain stitch. We're going to use a wax linen thread. This is really strong and it slides really easily through the openings and the signatures and in the cover nicely. So we're going to use that. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. I usually use about like 3 arm lengths of wax linen thread to start. It is pretty easy to add wax linen thread as you go. So at some point I will show you and demonstrate how to do that. You just need to make sure that you're adding it inside of a signature as opposed to adding it on the outside when you're sewing the spine where it's exposed in the book. I'm just going to recut this because the edge is a little hairy. I usually like to kind of squeeze the thread a little bit. It is waxy, so it does rub off on your fingers a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and just slide it right through the eye of my needle. I'm not going to pull it like halfway through. I'm just going to pull about like 6 inches or so through. It usually stays in the needle pretty well because of its waxy consistency. So, okay, so now we're ready with our needle and thread. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the cover to the side for a second, and I'm going to start inside of the first signature. I'm going to set the rest of the signatures in the back cover just off camera for a second. I'll pull them out as I need them. Okay, so we're actually going to start sewing from the inside of the signature. The reason we sew from the inside of the signature is that this way the end of the tail where we're going to knot the thread to keep it from sliding through will be inside of the book, and so it won't be exposed on the outside. Now we are going to pull it through, and we're going to have to leave a little bit of a tail inside of the book. So you'll see the purpose for the paper clips very shortly because it's easy to open the signature to the middle where we need to sew through by having the paper clips there. We can also just put the tail inside of a paper clip for now. You just want to make sure you don't tug the needle and the rest of the thread too hard that pops out of there. Okay, I'm going to put my scissors off to the side as well. Okay, now that we're through from the inside of the signature out to the spine part of the signature, we're going to go ahead and take the cover, making sure that the end sheet is against the pages. And we're going to go ahead and take our curved needle and poke it through the corresponding hole in the cover. Okay. Now, when you're pulling the needles through, you just want to be careful. You just want to gently twist. You don't want to ever bend the needle. Yes, they are made out of metal, but it's not a super sturdy, strong metal, so you don't want to bend them because they will break. And then I always like to go back around again. So I'm just going around this way and in through the cover again, just as like an extra reinforcement. And again, you want to twist and gently pull. You don't want to bend. I'm just going to pull that through. It is really, really important that each time, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do one more stitch through that cover. And then I'm going to go back into the signature. And this is just going to make it so there's 2 strings around the cover here. It's a little bit tougher to get through this time, just because that hole has a string going all the way through it already. And again, you want to pull this nice and taut. So really just remember to always tighten your stitches. You just don't want to pull so hard that your string pops out of here. Okay, so now you can see that we started in here, we came out of the signature, went into the cover, went around the cover twice. So there's 2 strings here. And now there's going to be a third that goes back around the cover, and then it's going to go into the signature, the same hole that we came out. Okay, so see how that's going in there? Now, when I open this up, I want to make sure that it's coming inside the middle of the signature where I have the paper clips positioned. And now Now here again, I want to make sure that I keep pulling the excess string through, making sure that this is nice and taut against there. And then I'm going to pull this out of the paper clip, so I'm going to take the tail out, and I'm going to go ahead and knot this. And I want to do a nice, strong double knot. Okay. Then this can just hang out here for a little bit. You can trim it later. You just never want to trim it right against the knot. You always want to trim at least an inch away. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next hole down from the top of the signature. So I'm simply going to take my string and I'm going to take my needle and just push it out the same way that as I did before. Okay, and so it's coming from inside to the outside of the signature. And I'm going to pull this so there's no slack on the inside. Okay, so if we go back to opening the signature to look at the inside, you'll see, okay, so it's stitching down on the inside. Now, on the outside, we're going to attach the cover again. And so I want to find the corresponding hole in the cover. I'm going to go around that once. You can get away with just doing one stitch like this and going back in, but again, I like to do like 2 or 3 just to make it really sturdy and stable. Okay. Each time, always making sure I just gently twist the needle to pull it through. Each time, just making sure that the string is nice and taut. And now I'm going to go back into the signature. Okay, I actually put my finger in here while I'm pushing the needle through. You just have to be careful that you don't accidentally like stab your finger while it's in there, but I just put it in there just to make sure the needle is coming through the center of the signature. Occasionally the needle will sneak up in the other pages, and then you just need to pull it out and make sure that it goes back into the signature. Okay, so I'm going to pull this in. Okay, and if you feel like, oh, it's like stuck on something, just go out and just make sure it didn't get stuck on like the corner of the book or anything like that. Okay, now the process is going to repeat.
The process will be the same for all of the remaining holes except for the last one. When I pull the needle through the cover, I always insert the needle from the inside of the cover to the outside. If you do the opposite, that is fine. It just might look slightly different. I used a burgundy waxed linen because it matched the color scheme of the papers I used over the covers and on the end sheets. It does come in different colors and can be found at most craft stores. There are different colors available in the art room as well.
Okay, so now I am outside the last hole in the first signature. I'm going to go through the hole in the cover. Then I'm going to wrap around the cover once. Make sure that this loop goes around the side of the cover, not the bottom. Get that nice and tight, and then wrap around it twice. Oh, and I broke my needle. Okay, that's what happens if you bend the needle. I'm usually really good about not letting that happen, but it just broke. Oh, that's such a bummer. Okay. Try not to let that happen. Okay, I'm going to thread this needle now. Let's go the second time. Wrapping the string around. Okay, be careful to twist and pull and not bend. Ooh, don't want to break another needle. Okay. Now we're ready to attach the next signature. So I'm going to pull the next signature out. Before I go into this bottom hole, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just take my curved needle and sneak around the bottom here. This just makes the stitching more even and makes it so you don't have this giant like loop that goes into here from the front of the cover. So it just makes it look a little bit nicer. Make sure that this lines up there. Pull it nice and tight. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and go into the bottom hole in the next signature. Oops, wrapped around there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go up a hole in the signature. Okay, and remember these paper clips make things really easy so I can open to the right spot all the time. Go ahead and pull that, make sure it's nice and taut. Okay, now I'm going to close that. I'm going to take this curved needle and I'm just going to go underneath all of the stitches that attach the first signature to the cover. And so I'm basically just running my needle down below those stitches between the first signature and the cover. So that's all that I'm doing, is just running my needle underneath the stitches that attach the first signature to the cover. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew back into this signature. And that process is going to repeat. For the next hole. So I'm going to pause my recording for a second and try and get a little bit closer so that way you can see exactly what's happening.